Hi, I am El Benedict D. Valdez and I am from grade 12 Pythagoras, and in this video I will tackle about the properties of the liquid water. Water is a very known liquid because of its abundance to our living and because of unique properties that hold a significant role for the life on earth. Properties of water is developed due to their hydrogen bonds and is illustrated by high boiling point, high specific heat, having less density in solid form, high heat of vaporization, and high surface tension. In this video, I will tackle about special properties of water by doing some experiments. Our objectives are, by conducting these experiments, we are able to, number 1, illustrate the different properties of water in action. Number 2, describe the properties of water. And the last, number 3, explain the relation of each property to the molecular structure of water and the intermolecular forces between its molecules. So now let's go to our experimentation area to perform the experiment number 1. So experiment number 1 is about solvent properties of water. So for the materials needed in the experiment number 1, we need 3 glasses of water, a salt, a baking soda, a oil, and a stirring tool. I use a spoon as a stirring tool. So for the procedure, put salt in the first glass with water. Next, put baking soda into the second glass with water. And lastly, put oil into the third glass of water. And then, using the stirring tool, try to stir or mix the substance with salt, baking soda, and oil. Mix it thoroughly until dissolved. And then observe. So for the guide question for this experiment number 1 question. What happened to the mixture? Why? Explain each mixture. For the mixture of salt and water, the salt dissolves. It is because of the ion dipole forces of attraction between the atoms of the molecules from both substance. And that's because the negatively charged ion of water is greatly affected to the positive charge sodium ion of salt. Next, for the mixture of water and baking soda. The baking soda dissolves, but after sometimes the dissolved baking soda has precipitated, meaning it turns into insoluble solid. Its composition, like carbon, sodium, oxygen, hydrogen, makes it highly soluble in water, yet could still recover without any change. And lastly, the mixture of oil and water. The oil floats. As you can see, it doesn't mix. The molecular structure of the oil has charges that are evenly distributed throughout, making it nonpolar, while water is a polar molecule. So for the conclusion for this activity, in this study, I learned that nonpolar molecule, such as oil, cannot form a hydrogen bond at a polar molecule like water. And water is considered as a universal solvent because of its ability to dissolve more substance than any other liquid. We should always remember that nonpolar molecules cannot form hydrogen bond with polar molecules as they only attracted to themselves. Following the introduction and the objectives, experiment number 2 is about thermal properties of water. So, in this experiment number 2, we will needing the materials, 2 medium-sized balloon, a candle, a lighter, and a balloon inflator. So, for the procedure, first, we will inflate this only one balloon. So, after we inflate, we will need to tie it up. The second procedure is we need to put water into the other balloon. So this is the balloon with water and we need to inflate this one also. So after inflating the balloon with water, we need to tie this up also. So before proceeding to the next procedure, please make sure that you need to be really careful in doing this experiment because this experiment includes fire. So the next procedure in this experiment is we need to put flame into the candle. So, after putting flame into the candle, we need to get the balloon without water and put into the top of the candle and see what happens. So next, we need to put again fire into the candle because it died after the explosion of the first balloon. So after we put flame into the candle, we need to get the second balloon with water and put it on the top of the candle and see what happens. So again, so after the procedure, we will go on to the guide questions. So we have two questions in this experiment and the first one is, why the balloon without water burst or pop when placed into the flame? And the answer for that is, the fire makes the balloon rubber hot. When the balloon rubber gets hot, it becomes too weak to resist the pressure of air inside the balloon. So the last question is, why the balloon with water doesn't burst when placed into the flame? And the answer for that is that the water-filled balloon doesn't burst because the rubber doesn't reach a certain amount temperature that is able to burn or melt the balloon's rubber. And that's because of the water inside of it. So for the conclusion in this activity, I therefore conclude that this activity shows a properties of water, the highest specific heat. It states that water will require more heat energy before it vaporizes or change its temperature. I also learned that water has hydrogen bonds that hold water molecules together are responsible for many of its properties, including high specific heat or the ability to resist temperature change. So now let's blow the candle. Following the introduction and the objectives, experiment number 3 is about adhesion and cohesion properties of water. So for this third experiment, we will be needing stirring tool, dropper, food color, a penny, and a water. So for the first procedure, we will mix water with the food color. And then after we put food color into the water, we will mix it. And after mixing out the food color and the water, we will extract some drops of the colored water with the use of dropper. And after collecting some drops of colored water, we will pour this into the penny. So attention to my cameraman, please. So drop colored water into the penny until the penny can hold. So after putting drops of water into the surface of coin, we will now have our guide question. So for this activity, we have two guide questions, and the first one is, what property of water are shown in the experiment? The property of water or liquid that is shown in the experiment is surface tension. And the last question is, how coin can handle drops of water? The attraction of water molecules to other substance is called adhesion. As drops of water are added into penny, the adhesive force between the water and the penny keeps the water from falling off. So for the last part of this experiment, the conclusion. In this experiment, I have learned that cohesion and adhesion works together so that the water can perform its other properties. In this activity, we also see the capillarity action of a liquid. Following the introduction and the objectives, experiment number 4 is about water density as a property of liquid. So, the materials needed in experiment number 4 are cold water, hot water, 2 pairs of glasses. Make sure that they are same in terms of size so that we will able to do the experiment. 2 different color of food color, and also make sure that they are same in color so that we will able to determine how the experiment works. Steering tool, plastic divider, and I use this top so that I won't make any messy here at our house. So for the procedure, we will put or fill up the 1 bottle with hot water and 1 more bottle with cold water. So hot water, and then cold water here. So after pouring hot water and cold water into 1 pair of glass, we will now add food color. So I will put color violet food color into the hot water, and then yellow food color into the cold water, and then after adding food color, we will stir with the use of stirring tool. And then after stirring, now we will place first this hot water into this tub so that we will not make any mess. And then using our plastic divider, we will put the plastic divider into the top of the cold water and then slowly flip it into the hot water. And then remove the plastic divider and see what happens. So the next procedure is that we will do again the first 3 procedure, which is pouring hot water into 1 glass and then pouring cold water into other pair. And then also, just like previously, we will put yellow food color into the cold water, and then violet food color into the hot water, and then we will stir it. But this time, we will flip the hot water into the cold water, unlike in our previous procedure that we put cold water into the hot water. So we will put this cold water here, and then we will cover this top of the glass using our plastic divider and then flip into the cold water. And then after flipping, we will remove the plastic divider. and then see what happens. After doing the procedure of the experiment, we will now go on into the guide question. So in this experiment, I've list two guide questions to answer, and the question number 1 is, what have you noticed to the first scenario when you put cold water into the top of hot water? Why? And the answer is, when I put the cold water into the top of hot water, it mixes. Because we know that cold water goes down and hot water rises. That's why it mixes. So for the number 2 question, what have you noticed to the second scenario when you put the hot water into the top cold water? Why? It did not mix because both colored water in the bottle are put into its respective place. The hot water don't need to rise because the hot water is already on top, and the cold water don't need to go down because the cold water is already underneath of hot water. Maybe it will only mix when the hot water in top cool down. So after answering the guide question, we will now go on into the conclusion. In this experiment, I conclude that the density of water is inversely proportional to the temperature. When the temperature is high, the volume of the water also increases, which causes less its density. But if the temperature is low, the volume decreases as its molecules move into each other, and it will increase its density, causing it to sink due to the force of gravity. And I hope that by doing those 4 experiments, I will tackle the different properties of liquid. So that's it. Thank you.